Snow blew like torn paper across the frozen parking lot, and the little girl's hands were raw and red as she sifted through a church dumpster. Caleb Reed
This is
meant to keep
free.
walking. He meant to bring home milk and cinnamon and convince his 9-year-old daughter that Santa was sleigh-bound, not stuck in Duluth traffic. But the girl looked up, and in her eyes, gray-blue and stubbornly bright, he saw a hunger that wasn't for food. It was for something she didn't have words for. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're reading from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. It was Christmas Eve in Maple Harbor, the wind knifing across Maple Street, the town covered in that grimy kind of half-snow that looked prettier in postcards than in person. Someone had draped a string of cheap gold tinsel around the scent. Gabriel's sign, but it flapped violently, like it wanted out. The neon cross buzzed a weary red. Caleb tucked his chin into the collar of his work jacket and quickened his step, cradling the paper bag of groceries against his ribs. He was late as it was. Ellie would be waiting in her pajamas with the owls on them, unbrushed hair cowlicking up where her mother used to smooth it down. He had almost made it past the dumpster when he heard the clink of glass and a rustle. His mind pulled up headlines and horrors. He pivoted, an instinct honed by nights of unexpected phone calls and years of having to be both parent and guard dog. "Hey," he called softly because he remembered the way voices could scare birds right out of trees. "You okay in there?" The girl flinched. So small, God, her coat was thin, one sleeve ripped and held by duct tape that had lost its stick. He could make out a constellation of sticker stars on her backpack, the edges of each peeled and grimy. "I'm not stealing," she said, chin tilted. Her voice had the high plains flatness of kids who have learned to test you. "Dumpster means trash, trash means free." Caleb moved slowly, closer to the metal bin, careful not to spook. "What's your name?" She considered him as if names were currency, offered too much, you couldn't get it back. "Wren." "Like the bird," she set her jaw. "Birds know how to find things." Caleb couldn't argue with that. He set the grocery bag on the curb and held his hands out, palms up. "I'm Caleb, I don't want to scare you, Wren. You look cold. You sure you don't want a hot chocolate at me's? It's warm in there." "I can't," she said quickly. He watched her pull another object from the mouth of the dumpster, the wing of a porcelain angel, cracked but pretty. She wiped it on her jeans. The jeans were 2 inches too short. Her ankles were red and raw. Caleb's breath plumed in the air. Behind him, a horn honked. Someone yelled Merry Christmas in a voice that sounded more like a dare. "You looking for something specific?" "A star," she said, like you should have known. "For a tree," Caleb blinked. "There's a store 2 blocks over sells toppers, but not that kind," she cut in. "Those cost money." "I mean the throwaway kind. People always throw away parts of stars after church. I saw one last year, a glitter one, but the back was busted. If you find one and tape it, you can still use it if you're careful." A gust of wind tossed her hair across her eyes. The hair wanted to be soft and shiny. It had that flyaway light brown gleam. It was oily. He could see faint smudges under her eyes, a bruised fatigue that didn't belong on a child. "Who needs the star?" he asked. Wren's face shuddered with an imperceptible click. "You didn't get that kind of click unless you'd practiced it." "A friend." He tried again. "How old are you?" She rocked back on her heels like she was deciding whether to bolt. 8, mostly, almost 9. He gave her a half smile. 9 is a good age. It was. It wasn't 2. 9 was wanting to be brave and be held all at once. 9 was asking where your mother had gone and listening to the spaces between your father's answers. The wind howled down the alley. Caleb looked at the flimsy barrier of Wren's coat and then up at the stained glass of St. Gabriel's. The church was dark. The midnight service wouldn't start for a few hours yet. He'd promised Ellie he'd be home in time to watch It's a Wonderful Life and not say anything snide at the scene by the swimming pool. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look," he said. "Me's diner is right there and I can get you cocoa and pie with real whipped cream. You can warm up." He glanced at her face, searching for a parent, a guardian shadow, anyone trailing her. There was no one. "And if you want, I can help you look for a star. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. It could have gone either way. You could see it in how her shoulders hunched up. Then she nodded once. "Pie," she repeated like it was a password. They walked side by side through the slush. Caleb kept a careful distance. Wren moved with a wary lightness, the gait of someone who never assumed a step was safe. He noticed a chain at her neck, tucked beneath her shirt, a glint when the wind yanked the fabric sideways. He filed it away without knowing why. Mies was half empty, the air inside a warm syrup of coffee and bacon grease. A wreath hung crooked over the register. A teenage boy with a Santa hat bussed a booth, humming under his breath. Me herself, 60-something, a permanent lipstick smudge on her tooth, pointed at Caleb with a spoon. "You're late," she said. "You promised Ellie an apple pie." Caleb lifted his paper bag. Got sugar and apples, he said. And a pie pan, it's a whole production, but I need a warm-up first and cocoa for my friend. Me's gaze flicked to Ren, the spoon paused midair. Me's face did something like soften and sharpen at once. She had raised kids of her own and watched them leave the nest with old coats. Sit, she said. I'll make it extra. She shooed them to a booth and brought over 2 heavy ceramic mugs with heat that seeped into fingers and bones. Ren curled her hands around the mug as if it were a bowl of sunlight. She sniffed the steam before she swallowed, a bird testing the air. Her first sip was reverent. She stared at the swirl of cream like it could tell her a secret. Caleb watched. His chest hurt in that odd, high-up place. He pulled his phone from his pocket and glanced at the time and at the message icon, 2 texts from Ellie, you coming, and also we used the good tape, sorry, love you. He smiled even as panic pinged around his ribs, a familiar rhythm. Ren darted a look at his phone. You have a kid? Yeah, he said. Ellie, she's 9. She likes to pretend she's in charge. Ren's mouth tilted up at the corner. Her teeth were small, one slightly chipped. Sounds right, she said. She took another sip and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Ren, he said carefully, do you have where are you going? After the star, I mean. She stared into the cocoa and the steam ghosted up. Back, she said finally. To the motel by the highway. Miss Patty's there. She says she's my foster mom this week. She has a dog that barks at nothing. She watches TV loud. And she knows you're out. He kept his voice even. Ren's shoulders went up again, stalled near her ears. She took a long sip. She was asleep. She said don't wake her for stupid things. It wasn't stupid. Her eyes darted like she would dare him to argue. I had to find the star. Caleb opened his mouth and closed it. He felt a swell of anger he didn't know where to put. It wasn't helpful to sit there and burn. He looked at the thin chain at her throat again. That necklace, he said as casually as he could. It's pretty. Ren's hand flew to it. It's mine, she said. It's not stolen. I believe you, he said. She studied him, searching for mockery. When she didn't find any, she tugged the chain up and out. A small pendant dangled into the light, a tiny silver heart split down the middle. The split wasn't a design, it was a real break, a jagged seam like a river down a map. Ren turned it over with a finger. On the back, somebody had scratched words, small and neat and worn from rubbing. Caleb leaned forward. His throat went tight without warning. It read, to the second star. He had seen that phrase etched into mirrors and scribbled in card margins. He had heard it in the dark, whispered when they lay awake with the windows open in June. Naomi had loved Peter Pan with an embarrassing ferocity. She had always insisted the phrase wasn't about refusing to grow up. It was about holding on to the piece of you that didn't break when the world tried to snap you in half. Follow the second star, she used to murmur into Ellie's hair, as if stars were breadcrumbs that led you back when you were lost. Caleb swallowed. His thumb found the edge of the table and pressed until the groove left a dent in his skin. Pretty, he managed. Where'd you get it? Ren's eyes softened, complicated. My mom, she said. My first mom, before, she gave it to me when I was a baby, Miss Maria says. She said my mom didn't have a house then, but she had a necklace that was a half heart. She said, my mom said we'd have the other half somewhere. Caleb sat very still while his heart sprinted. He imagined the upstairs dresser drawer, top left, where he kept Naomi's ring and her watch and the locket he had never understood. He had turned it over in his fingers nights he couldn't sleep, the little half-heart engraved with follow the second. He had never found the second half. Me arrived like salvation and distraction with slices of pie that steamed sweet apple into the air. She set a plate in front of Ren and didn't comment on the way her hands trembled. Caleb cleared his throat. You said you needed the star for a friend, he said. What friend? Ren bit her lip. Miss Patty doesn't put up a tree because she says it's stupid, but the man in 2B, Mr. Red Shoes, he had a little pink tree and it fell over and the star broke and he cried. I was in the hallway and I saw him cry. I want to fix it. That's what Christmas is, fixing stars. Caleb didn't realize he'd gripped his fork until the tines left crescents in his palm. He took a slow breath. Okay, he said. We can fix stars. She looked at him like he'd offered her something she couldn't yet name. She attacked the pie as if she could climb into it. He let her. He took a bite of his and tasted cinnamon and something like memory. After, he pulled Ellie's pie to go from the counter, and he and Ren went back out into the cold, under a sky bleached white with clouds. They walked behind the church, around the corner where the wind hit like a wall. They sifted together through things that used to be precious and had been set down. Caleb remembered Naomi's fingers on a thrift store shelf, how she'd put a chipped bowl to her cheek and say it still remembers being held. There in the slush, half hidden under a flattened candy cane box, Ren found it, the metal skeleton of a star topper. The wires were bent, the The gold foil that had covered it was torn to rags. But if you loved it hard enough, you could see a star inside it. Ren lifted it like a hunter with a prize. "Ha," she said, almost a laugh, her eyes pinched bright. "Knew it." "Let's fix it," Caleb said. She grinned up at him. The grin hit him like sunlight. "You have tape, the good kind?" "By some miracle," he said, thinking of Ellie's text and the role she'd probably mangled in the effort. He checked his watch. "Come on. We'll stop by my place and then I'll walk you to the motel." She hesitated, the grin folding in on itself. "Trust. That was always the dagger you had to pull out from between your ribs quietly." "Okay," she breathed finally. They stepped into the Reeds' apartment and the first thing Ren did was inhale, deep and greedy. The warmth, yes, but also the smell. The air in Caleb's apartment always smelled like lemon oil and graphite pencils, and something sweet that clung to the woodwork from a life that had included a kindergarten teacher who believed in stickers and baked bread on Sundays. He tried to keep it smelling like that, like Hope had rooms here and not just corners. "Ellie," he called, kicking off boots. "We have a guest." Ellie barreled out of her room, brown hair in chaotic pigtails, socks skidding on linoleum. She skidded to a halt when she saw Ren. You could watch kids weighing each other the way you might watch someone measure flour. How many cups of friend, how many cups of threat? "Hi," Ellie said cautiously. "Hi," Ren echoed, eyes darting around like magpies. She took in the tree in the corner, squat and endearing with its lopsided paper chains. The angel on top leaned at an angle that looked less heavenly and more tipsy. Across from the tree, on the bookshelf, a picture smiled out. Naomi holding a baby Ellie under a row of paper stars, beaming with the kind of joy that hurt to look at too long. Naomi's absence was a furniture in the room Caleb had learned to move around. He hadn't always been graceful about it. "We're fixing a star," he told Ellie and held up the metal skeleton. "Ren found it." Ellie lit up in that instant, as if someone had plugged her into an outlet. "We have the good tape, I mean sort of. We have the halfway decent tape and also ribbon and glitter that Dad says is a crime." "It is a crime," Caleb said. "It gets into your soul and you can never wash it out." "Glitter," Ren said, savoring the syllables like they were pastry. Ellie dragged supplies from a cabinet with mission-level efficiency. Ren hovered, eyes huge, fingers twitching. Caleb poured cocoa into mugs and handed them off like he was issuing medals. He moved around the kitchen the way his body remembered, missing how another body used to move, the space Naomi used to fill. He had made their life smaller and neater to keep from falling off the edges. Ellie and Ren bent their heads together over the star, curling foil and ribbon around wire, tape smoothing the frayed ends. Ren's hands were quick and decisive. She knew where to press and where to stop pressuring. She knew the difference between something broken and something in need of a different holding. Ellie talked, words tumbling, about how they had watched The Grinch and how she thought the Who's Down and Whoville were stupid to pretend everything was fine all the time. Ren listened with her whole body like she was starving for sound. Caleb tried not to stare at the necklace again. He failed. When Ren leaned to pick up the glitter, the half-heart flashed. It made his fingers itch. He excused himself and went into his bedroom, closing the door quietly. He went to the dresser to the top left drawer and lifted out the small velvet-lined box he hadn't opened in months. He sat on the edge of the bed and flipped the lid. The ring winked at him, plain band, no stone, exactly what Naomi had wanted. The watch caught the light. And the locket. He lifted it out carefully, the chain a fine, smooth weight in his palm. The tiny silver heart was a broken half, jagged, its back engraved. He turned it over, follow the second. He sat very still. The quiet in the apartment was not silent. He could hear Ellie's voice and Ren's breathy burst of laughter, the radiators hiss like a living thing. He could hear Naomi in those, and that was the part that undid him, because for a long time he had pretended that hearing anything of her hurt less than listening to everything. He walked back into the living room. His fingers shook. Ellie looked up, eyes flicking from his face to the locket and back. Something between them passed, a flicker of understanding born of 9 years of watching him swallow grief. She scooted closer to Ren and held the star steady. "Ren," Caleb said softly, may I see your necklace again, just for a second?" Ren went still. The old fear rose in her like a dolphin and arced. You could see it break the skin of safety. Her fingers clamped down on the heart. "It's mine," she said automatically. "Yes," he said quickly. "Of course, you don't have to take it off. This is my wife's." He held up the broken heart. He wanted to say her name, but he feared it would spook everything. "I just look." Ren's eyes narrowed, suspicious and curious at once. She tilted her wrist and let her half angle into the light. Slowly, Caleb lifted his own half and brought the jagged edges close. They clicked like a key finding its lock. Ren gasped. Ellie's mouth fell open. Caleb forgot to breathe. The air in the room went thin. The combined heart was small in his hands, but it was heavy with 1,000 tremors, like two magnets that had wanted each other for years had finally been allowed to meet. It was a ridiculous, sentimental thing to feel, and he felt it anyway. "Second star," Ren whispered, as if the words had a taste she recognized. "Mama said that." Ellie's gaze snapped to him. "Dad?" "I know," he said. He realized his hand was on the back of a chair and he was gripping it hard enough to turn his knuckles white. He forced his fingers to release. Ren pulled back slightly, instinctively tugging her own half away, and the pieces separated with a tiny chime. "How do you have that?" she demanded, eyes bright with panic. "How?" Caleb sucked in a breath and let it out slowly. "My wife, Naomi, had the other half. She used to say follow the second star a lot." The words skid. He took a step back to give them room. "May I tell you something about her?" Ren watched him like a cornered thing, but she nodded. "She died 3 years ago," he said, because the fact was a piece of furniture too. It didn't get smaller because he didn't say it. "She was kind and stubborn and she loved books too much. And she had this necklace. She never told me where it came from. I asked and she said, someday it will tell me." Ren's eyes flickered down to the half-heart at her throat and back up. The wariness in her face did not disappear. "You didn't unlearn suspicion in one night, but something else pushed up like a brave green thing through snow, hope maybe, or recognition of a language spoken long ago." "Okay," she said, "but it could be not the same." Her hand hovered at her throat. "Miss Maria said lots of jewelry looks the same. It doesn't mean anything. People want it to mean things, that's what they want for Christmas." "That's true," Caleb said, because honesty was coin he wanted to spend. He slid his half back onto its chain. It could mean nothing. He could feel Ellie's disappointment like a gust of wind at his back. He kept going, but it could mean something. "Sometimes the world hides a map inside things, Ren." She tilted her head, skeptical but listening. "Is Ren your full name?" he asked, careful. She shrugged. "It's what people call me." "Do you know what your first mom named you?" Ren's mouth flattened. "Maria said sometimes moms don't get to name babies if they—" She swallowed hard enough to make a sound. "She said my mom did though. She named me Rowan, but no one used it." Caleb's knees went loose for half a second, memory slamming into him with the force of a wave. Naomi, years ago, at the kitchen table, scribbling names on a napkin and arguing with herself. "Rowan," she had murmured, as if tasting it. "Rowan, because it's a tree that wards off evil, because it lives where the wind is cruel, because it sounds like a piece of music and the name of a person who will not break." He had laughed at her dramatics and said if they had a boy they were calling him Clint. She'd thrown a walnut at his head. Ellie saw it in his face. "Dad," she whispered, "say it." "Naomi, she liked the name Rowan," he said. The room was as quiet as snowfall. "She said it was a fierce name." Ren's eyes filled. She blinked, furious at the betrayal of tears. "It was just a name." "Yes," he said, "but it was her name for a baby she loved." He did not say that he did not know what to do with the avalanche that had just fallen into his living room. He did not say that he wanted to cry for the girl in front of him, and for the woman he had loved, and for the years between them. He did not say that he was terrified to want this to be what it seemed. Ellie broke the moment like a brilliant, messy wedge. "Do you want to put the star on our tree, just for a minute, like a test?" Ren swiped her sleeve across her eyes. She sniffed. "We have to bring it to Mr. Red Shoes," she reminded them, miserly with her excitement lest loss come to collect. "We can't keep it." "Just for a minute," Ellie pleaded, already dragging a chair toward the tree, already scheduling wonder. Ren nodded once, and Ellie scrambled up and did the thing that has always unmanned Caleb. She grinned up at the top of the tree like it was the mouth of a new world and reached. The apartments across the alley glowed soft with lamps and silhouettes. The star wobbled. Ellie adjusted it. It caught the light. It wasn't perfect. That was what made it perfect. The glitter sparkled in tiny brazen bursts. Ren stared up and shivered like someone who had been cold too long is only now thawing. "Ready," Caleb said, and they all said it together, "Ready." Ellie flipped the switch. The tiny string lights blinked on. The star shook a little, then settled. Ren laughed like she'd been holding her breath for 8 years. Caleb walked Ren back to the motel. He insisted. Ren protested that she could do it herself and he was not in charge. He told her she was right and he was walking anyway. They moved through the streets past the shapes of families framed in windows, the warm, the loud, the lonely. Maple Harbor didn't have much, but it had a lot of people pretending you had enough when you didn't. The motel was the kind of place that tried, and the trying made it sadder. The sign blinked MTEL, the O dead. A candy cane hung on the office door with a bow so red it hurt your eyes. On the second floor, the hallway smelled like supermarket flowers and stale cigarettes. A man in red sneakers snored in a chair outside 2B, a tinsel garland drooping over his shoulders like a boa. He held a can of orange soda to his chest as if it were an infant. When Ren saw him, her face softened with the ferocity of a soldier who has taken a vow. "Mr. Red Shoes," she whispered. "That's him." She knocked on his door, no answer. She turned to 2C, knocked harder. After a minute, the door opened to reveal Miss Patty, a thin woman in a faded sweater, hair dyed the color of gasoline. Her expression was empty in a way that told you it wasn't always that way. Emptiness had moved in and cluttered her space. "You," she said to Ren, a complicated blend of relief and irritation. "Where have you been, sweetheart?" "I said don't run out. You scared me." Ren's mouth tightened. "You were sleeping," she said, her chin jutted. "I went to get a star." Caleb stepped into the light of the hallway. Patty caught sight of him and straightened, suspicion flaring. "Who?" "I'm Ren's friend," Caleb said, tripping over the shortness of the word. "I wanted to make sure she got back safe. We found a star for Mr. Red Shoes." Patty's eyes flicked past him to the star. For a second, something like real warmth cracked through. "Well, aren't you a?" She shook her head. "That's good of you," she said grudgingly. Her gaze cut to Caleb's hands. Her body went rigid. "You didn't grab her, did you?" Caleb felt the burn of anger again, sat on it. "No," he said calmly. "She came with me to get warm and eat. I believe she fell asleep. We brought her back." Patty sniffed. "Well, thanks." She stared at Ren. "Get in." "You shouldn't be out without me." Her voice softened a hair. "You could have asked." "I did," Ren muttered. She looked up at Caleb. Panic flashed and then disappeared. "Thank you," she said, the words stiff with bravery. She hugged the star to her chest and slipped past Patty. Caleb's fists curled at the sight of her stepping into that dim room. He stood in the hallway a minute longer, looking at Mr. Red Shoes and the way his chest rose and fell. He imagined his own daughter asleep under a ceiling that had water stains shaped like continents. He went to the office, wrote his number on a scrap of paper, and slid it under the door labeled manager. He scrawled, "If she needs help, call me." He added, "I'm a dad." He didn't know why that felt like the truest credential he had. When he got home, Ellie was sitting on the couch with both feet tucked beneath her, the old blanket with whales draped over her shoulders. She had the locket in her hand, her thumb rubbing the engraving until it was warm. "You're thinking it too," she said when he sat down. "I'm thinking a lot of things," he said. "That she's a piece," Ellie said. "Like a piece Mom left that we didn't know about." Caleb closed his eyes. He tried to locate anger again and found only fear and something like awe, and underneath that a slow, climbing love that scared him because it brought with it all the ways he could fail. "We don't know," he said. "We can't know, not yet." "She's right there," Ellie said, tears in her voice without tears in her eyes. She had learned to save them. "She's right there, Dad." He reached for Ellie's hand and she let him have it. The weight of the locket in his other palm felt like a challenge. He looked at the photo on the bookshelf. The Naomi in the picture was younger, hair shorter, eyes laughing at something out of frame. He had loved her then because she was Naomi. He loved her now in a way that made that love look small. Grief does that. It returns, changed, more itself. He stood. "I need to look," he said. He climbed the rickety pull-down ladder to the attic. He hadn't been up there in months. That was where he kept the boxes he wasn't brave enough to unpack and the ones he wasn't heartless enough to throw out. The air was dusty, and the particles glittered in the beam of the flashlight like tiny, stubborn stars. He found the box labeled Naomi, Journals, and dragged it across the boards. He sat cross-legged, fingers shaking, and lifted the lid. He had promised himself he wouldn't read them. They were hers. They had been heavy with her when she was alive. After she died, they were heavier. But he had also promised to be a good father, and sometimes those promises tugged in opposite directions, and one of them had sharper teeth. He opened one to the middle at random and landed on a page dated 11 years ago, the ink smudged by a tear that had dried long before. June 14. "My hands are shaking. They feel like birds. I think they're going to fly right off my wrists. I did a brave and stupid thing, or a stupid and brave one, and the only difference is where I stand when I tell it. She is the most beautiful who has ever been. I held her for 15 minutes and 23 seconds. I counted. Her hair is the color of light under a leaf. I told her the story of the second star, and I told her my name and her name, Rowan. I'll write it here because I am so scared it will be erased by people who think they know better. Rowan, 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 I will write to you until my hand breaks, and then I will write with the other. I split the necklace like I told Mama I would never do, and I think she hates me for it. But I want you to have a piece of my heart somewhere you can touch it. I do not know how to bear breathing without you." Caleb lowered the journal to his lap like it weighed more than a building. He bent his head. He tried to imagine the shape of 15 minutes and 23 seconds. He tried to picture a 19-year-old Naomi with her stubborn jaw naming a daughter no one would let her keep. He read more. The next page I almost told him today. The hymn was not named, but Caleb recognized himself anyway in the loops and edges of Naomi's guilt. We were at the thrift store and I held up a cardigan with rhinestones and he made that face he does and I almost said it because his face is safe. The next page, if she finds me someday, if she is brave and the world is kind for once, I will have the other half. I want to say I will be better then. I don't know what that means. I want to tell her I did not choose to leave her. I was barely a person. I want to tell her I am trying now to be one. The attic light flickered, came back. Caleb's throat yawned open and wouldn't close. He pressed his fingers hard to the words like he could warm them. He carried the journal downstairs tucked under his sweater like contraband. Ellie sat up even straighter when she saw his face. He read her pieces, and she listened like a Christmas Eve child listens to the fireplace, waiting for a sound you're sure you can never hear until you do. They slept badly, in the start and stop way you do when your heart is learning a new shape. Caleb woke at 3 a.m. from a dream where Naomi stood in a parking lot in the snow simply looking at him, no accusation in her face, only a terrible hope. He drank water. He held the locket to his heart like a talisman. By morning, the plan had settled in him without fanfare. He was going to find Wren's social worker and push every door that could open, gently when it could and hard when it couldn't. The office was small and overworked, stocked in the particular way public institutions are stocked, coffee-stained carpet, a plant that someone loved despite evidence it did not love them back. It was a bitter day after Christmas, the streets choked with slush and the sidewalks lined with abandoned pine trees resigning their posts. The social worker was younger than Caleb expected, 30, and tired with a humor that glittered like a knife. Her name tag read Marla Jensen. She looked at Caleb's face and at the girl at his side and did not sigh in a way that made Sally Field comparisons impossible. "This ought to be good," Marla said, not unkindly. "You're Caleb Reed," he said. "This is my daughter, Ellie. And you're here because—" Caleb placed the journal gently on the desk, next to the neatly arranged stack of files. He laid the locket on top. He felt ridiculous and reverent like a pilgrim with an offering. Marla raised an eyebrow at the jewelry. "We're not the lost and found." "I found a child," he said quietly. He wasn't dramatic by nature, he hated speeches. He tried to find the simple thread and follow it. Wren. She was alone on Christmas Eve, searching the church dumpster for a star. I took her home to warm up. I walked her back to the motel and left my number. I couldn't sleep. I found something in my late wife's journals. Wren's necklace matches my wife's, Marla. It's a split heart. She called it the second star. She gave half to the baby she had at 19. Her name, at least the name she chose, was Rowan. He watched Marla's face the way you watch a night sky for meteors. At first nothing, then the flicker. "Wren," Marla repeated, treasuring the shape of it. "How do you know her?" "I don't," he said. "I know her now and I want to know her more. I think she's my wife's biological daughter, which would make me not legally anything, I realize. But I'm a person who loved Naomi and I'm a dad, and my daughter would like to not be an only if she doesn't have to be." Marla sat back. "Okay," she said, looking up at the ceiling like it might offer advice. "Okay, you're not the first person to show up with a necklace and an epiphany, but the specific details make it interesting." She picked up the locket and turned it over, reading the engraving. She opened the journal to the starred page. She read silently, lips pressing together. She closed the journal. "Does Naomi's family know?" Caleb felt guilt slap him, fierce and baffling. "No, Naomi's mother and we talk. She'd want to know. I wanted to check if I was a crazy person first." "You are not a crazy person," Marla said dryly. "You are a person with a puzzle piece. Let me see if we can find the box it belongs to." She typed with a speed that made her nails click. "Wren," she repeated. "If she's the Wren I think she is, came into care 6 months ago. Mom adoptive, passed. No father listed on the adoption papers. Birth mother, if this is your Naomi, withheld from minor records, but the timing and the name," she looked up. "It tracks." Ellie made a sound like hope cracking. Marla held up a hand gently. "Tracking is not a guarantee. We have to do this by the book. DNA test. We move carefully if we move. And Caleb," she looked him square in the face, "you have to ask yourself if you're ready to welcome a child with trauma into your home, not because I think you can't. Because I need you to." Caleb thought of the way Wren had blinked at the first taste of sugar. He thought of his own heart, which he had been guarding since Naomi died as if it were a house with one chair and one cup. He thought of Ellie's face looking at the star. "I'm ready to try," he said simply. Marla nodded. "Then you and I will be friends, often annoyed with each other, but friends." She scribbled on a form and then reached for her coat. "We're going to go see Miss Patty." The motel smelled worse in daylight. Marla knocked with authority. Patty opened the door with wariness and hope. It was very possible that both had brought her through the last year. Marla introduced herself and asked for Wren. Wren appeared, hair brushed poorly, the necklace tucked inside her shirt as if hiding it was safer. She saw Caleb and did not smile, did not run. She stood like someone waiting for a verdict. Ellie hovered behind her father, hands in pockets to keep from reaching. Marla crouched. "Hi, Wren, I'm Marla. We're not here to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I'm here to ask if you want to come out for cocoa with me and your friends and talk." Wren's eyes flicked to Patty. Patty sighed. "Go on," she said, voice not unkind. "If you're going to go, go." "We'll bring you back," Marla said, and her tone was iron. She led them down the stairs like a general. They walked to Mies again, because where else do you go to decide the shape of a life? They sat. Wren's hand circled the mug. She looked at Marla, at Caleb, at Ellie. "Are you going to take me?" she asked. "I know what that means when people say it nice." Marla's eyes softened. "I'm going to ask if you want to meet the mom of the person who says he loves someone you remind him of." Wren squinted. "That's confusing." "Adults are confusing," Ellie offered gravely. "They say maybe when they mean no, and we'll see when they mean yes if I can afford it." Wren smiled, small and near feral. "Yeah," she said. She looked at Caleb. "I don't have to go anywhere I don't want to, Miss Maria says." "That's right," Caleb said. He needed those words as much as she did. "And if you don't want to come to my house ever again, I will be sad, but I will not push you. I will care from here." Wren studied him like she was reading a sign written in a language she understood but hadn't read in a long time. "I want to see her," she said suddenly. "The mother, your mother," she hesitated. "If she was my mother's mother," Caleb stiffened. Judith, he hadn't told her. He had a flood of selfish relief that Naomi wasn't here to watch him do this badly. "Okay," he said, "we can go." Judith Price lived in a white house with black shutters that had always looked to Caleb like it wanted to be a drawing more than a home. She had painted the porch bright yellow after Naomi died and told Caleb she needed a happier front. The porch light was on even though it was afternoon. She opened the door before they knocked, which meant she had been watching. "Caleb," she said, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked at Ellie. "Baby." Then she saw Wren and the smile failed. "And who is?" Caleb swallowed. He had rehearsed a speech in his head that made him sound like a person who knew where the floor was. Instead, he said Tish, because Naomi had always called her mother that when she wanted to soften her, and he had never been allowed to, and today he broke the rule. "This is Wren. We think she might be Rowan." Judith blanched. For a second, she was a woman undone. Then she was Judith again, fixing and straightening and ignoring earthquakes. "That's not funny," she said. Marla stepped forward with the sort of calm you develop as armor. "Miss Price, I'm Marla Jensen with the county. I'm here because we think there may be a biological connection." Judith stared at the necklace at Wren's throat, and whatever she had built inside herself against this moment collapsed. She reached out a hand like someone blind, then stopped it midair and let it hover. "Come in," she said, voice thread thin. "Please, come in." They entered the house that smelled like wax and lavender and regret. The living room had the same piano with the same framed pictures on top. One of them was of Naomi at 17, chin up, eyes daring the world. Caleb's lungs forgot how to expand. Judith sat. Wren stood, because children know furniture is for people who know whether they are staying. Marla guided her gently to the edge of a chair. Ellie pressed herself against Caleb's side, anxiety buzzing in her body like bees. "How did you?" Judith began. Caleb showed her the journal. He watched her face while she read. He watched her run her fingers over letters her daughter had written, a habit she had mocked while Naomi was alive. He watched her mouth form the name Rowan and tremble. "I should have told you," Judith said finally, so quietly it barely made a sound. She looked at Caleb with 10 years of defensiveness and love and the leftovers of both. "All of you. I should have told all of you." Her gaze found Wren and stayed. "They told me not to. They said it was better for everyone. They said so many things." She made a noise like something cracked. "I let them. I was scared. I was a coward. I am sorry." She held out her hands and let them fall into her lap. "I am sorry, Rowan." Wren's face shifted like weather, suspicion, bravery, hunger, fury. "Are you my grandma?" she asked, testing the word as if it might bite. Judith flinched. "If you want me," she said. The truth of it blistered the air. Wren's eyes sealed against tears again. She swallowed. "Okay," she whispered, then spoiled it by adding, "maybe." Caleb felt something in his chest loosen that had been clamped tight for a decade. He had been angry at Judith for not being Naomi, for not being kinder when Naomi needed it, for turning grief into rules. He had not made much space for the part of her that had been a girl once, scared of making a mistake that would drown the people she loved. Judith stood abruptly. "Wait," she said, and left the room. She returned with a small box, white cardboard yellowed at the edges. She set it on the coffee table. "She wrote a letter," she said. Her voice was a door that moved on old hinges. Naomi wrote a letter for someday. I couldn't, she shook her head. I couldn't be the one to find someone to give it to. I told myself I was waiting for the right time. There isn't a right time. There's only this. Marla leaned forward, a hand ready to intercept if the air turned too sharp. Judith lifted the lid. Inside was a thin envelope addressed in Naomi's looping, messy hand for you, my second star. Wren stared at it like a bomb. She did not reach out. She looked at Caleb. Do you want me to read it? He asked. He did not suggest Judith. He did not suggest anyone else. Wren nodded. He lifted the letter out with a reverence he had not had even for their marriage certificate. He unfolded it and braced himself against the first words like people brace for waves. Dear Rowan, Naomi had written, the letters forgiving and reckless at once. I hope you hate me and I hope you don't. I hope you are fierce. I hope you know you are loved, which is a stupid thing to write because people always write that and it always sounds like someone is crying while they do it because they are. I am. I am 19 and so dumb I should come with a warning label and the world is sharp and I did not know where to put you. So I put you back into the world and said, please, please, please love her like you mean it. You are named after a tree that survives wind. You are named after a melody you could hum and not forget. You are named after a girl I was before I got scared. I gave you my necklace because I wanted you to be able to touch my heart even if I was not around. One day I am going to be brave enough to find you. I am going to be kind enough to deserve you. And if I die and I don't find you first, I am about to say a sentence I am not allowed to say. Go to the house with a lemon oil smell and a girl with a laugh like bells. There will be a man there who will pretend he doesn't know how to love again and then he will. He will love you in a way that lets you love him back without owing anything. And the second star thing, it's not a map. It's a reminder. Don't lose the part of you that knows how to look up. I am sorry and I am trying. Love your mother who is always learning how. Caleb folded the paper very carefully and pressed it to his chest for a second like a child hoarding warmth. He handed it to Wren. Wren took it with both hands. She did not cry. She looked 14 years old and 8 at the same time. Okay, she said, which was the bravest word any of them had heard. Marla cleared her throat. She had let herself soften like this a dozen times and been burned twice as often. We will move forward with a kinship placement if that's what we want, she said. It will be messy. There is paperwork that could wallpaper your bathroom twice, Caleb. There are court dates. There is therapy for all of us, probably. She smiled, a shard of amusement. And there is a dog at Miss Patty's named Hank who I suspect will not miss his barking partner. Wren made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a hiccup. Hank is stupid, she said, relieved to be allowed to say so. He barks at light. Many of us do, Judith murmured, and nobody argued with her. Kinship. It was a word Caleb learned to say correctly in fluorescent lit rooms with chairs that made your spine forget its job. It meant the state would consider Wren theirs and his. It meant he would wake at night with a new guilt, that this girl moved through the world without a net for so long, and he had been making pies and hanging snowflakes from the ceiling and pretending that grief and love could be contained in seasonal traditions. He applied for everything they told him to, showed up where they told him to, sat cross-legged on the floor while a therapist named Dawn asked Wren to draw her house. Wren drew birds too, so many birds. In cages, out of cages, mid-flight, perched on telephone wires. She drew them with wire feet and bright eyes. She drew a small one with a necklace and shaded it in until the paper tore. She moved in slowly, first with a backpack, then a garbage bag, then a shoebox with a few hard-won treasures, a pebble shaped like a heart, a tooth in a tiny plastic case, a crumpled photo of a woman in glasses who had been her adoptive mother. She did not want to put the photo on a shelf. She tucked it under her pillow and slept on it for 3 nights, face turned toward the wall. Ellie struggled, and then she did not. She had wanted a sister like kids want snow days, abstract and perfect and then too much when it arrived. She resented the time Wren soaked up, the low voices outside her door. She resented the way their apartment shifted to accommodate a girl who could not stand doors closed. They fought over glitter. They fought over silence. Then one night, Wren woke sweating and gasping, the way kids do when their bodies remember hunger even when their stomachs are full. Ellie crawled under the blanket and pressed her knees against Wren's shins and whispered the plot of Peter Pan badly until Wren snored again. In the morning, they acted like it had never happened. They made pancakes with too many chocolate chips and burned the first batch and ate them anyway. Judith came on Thursdays with oranges and a stern voice that softened like butter on warm bread under Wren's eyes. She told stories about Naomi reluctantly at first, then with a flood she had been damming for too long. Ren listened greedily, hoarding scraps. She wanted to know what Naomi's baby laugh sounded like. She wanted to know what Naomi did when she was mad. She wanted to know if she could play piano. The answer to that last question was yes, poorly, but with enthusiasm. Ren touched the keys like a fragile animal at first, then hit them like an announcement, then found the way to coax sound she could stand. They went to court in November a year later, and the judge had the look of someone who had been a wrestler in high school. She asked Ren if she liked where she lived. Ren said, mostly. She asked Caleb if he understood the responsibility. He said, mostly. The judge smiled and looked at Marla and Judith and the bird drawings and the therapist's nod and said the word that turned them into more than they had been, placement. The winter that followed was the kind of cold that broke pipes and cars and people who thought they had already been broken enough. Caleb slipped on ice in the parking lot and swore with intimacy. He learned he could be patient and excitingly impatient in the same hour. He learned that love for a child is not a soft thing. It is a blade and a shield and a ridiculous number of trips to school to talk to the class about why Ren should be allowed to sit near the window, because she learns better if there's sky. One night in January, Ren appeared in the kitchen doorway holding the letter with the carefulness of a scientist with a volatile element. "What is your favorite part?" she asked Caleb abruptly, thrusting the paper like an accusation and a gift. "Of the letter," he smiled, slow. "The part where she tells you you can be angry," he said. "The part where she doesn't ask you not to be." He looked at his hands. "What's yours?" Ren frowned as if the question insulted the letter. "The part where she tells me to look up," she said finally. She lifted her chin. "Some grown-ups want you to always look at the ground so you don't trip," she added, blunt and wise. "But sometimes you trip because you're looking down, you don't see the pole." He nodded. "Maybe that's why they put bells on them in fancy cities," he said. Ren laughed like she'd been caught smiling. They went to St. Gabriel's that next Christmas, not because any of them had patched their faith, but because Ren wanted to stand at the dumpster and look at it, not in it. She touched the metal as if it were a monument. People came and went, faces ruddy from cold and relief. Me waved from across the street and threw a roll at Caleb's head. It hit him in the chest and burst open, and Ellie shrieked like it was a snowball. The air had that brittle, clear quality that makes everything look like it was cut from glass. "Can we," Ren asked tentatively, looking up at the sky, "get a star that isn't made of trash this year?" Caleb feigned horror. "Betrayal." She squared her shoulders. "We can make something pretty out of something broken," she said, reciting their creed with honor. "And sometimes we don't have to, sometimes we can have the good kind, just because." He reached for his wallet. "I can afford the good kind," he said, and his voice cracked because it wasn't about money, it was about permission. They went into the store with the window display of ornaments that made Ellie swear under her breath. Ren touched a star that was delicate and gold, filigree like frost. She gave Caleb a look that said she wanted it and was prepared not to get it. He bought it. She took the bag and cradled it like a baby bird and walked home very slowly as if sudden movements could scare the future away. They hung the star that night on a tree that was taller than Caleb's budget should allow. They stood together and turned on the lights, and the star caught the glow and threw it to the walls. The locket, whole, hung lower, near Naomi's picture on the shelf. Judith cried quietly and wiped her face with a napkin she pretended she needed for pie crumbs. Marla came by on her way to her own family and ate a slice of Me's apple pie and told Caleb to remember to bring in receipts in January. Mr. Red Shoes stopped by and introduced himself as Michael and wore sneakers that were, in fact, bright red. Hank barked at nothing. They all yelled at Hank the way people yell at dogs they love. Ren fell asleep on the couch, letter under her elbow, and hand curled around the star's empty box like a fairy tale object you can't bear to misplace. Ellie draped a blanket over her and shoved her own pillow under Ren's head with graceless tenderness. Caleb stood by the window and looked out at the dark where the second star, if you were poetic and could pretend coordinates into being, would be. He wished he believed in more than he did. He wanted Naomi to step through the door in her stupid snowflake hat and kiss both girls and smack him on the shoulder for not salting the steps. He wanted, and the wanting did not make him less happy about what he had. Ellie came to stand next to him, pressing her shoulder into his. "Dad," she said, voice a notch above a whisper. "Do you think she can see us?" He thought of Naomi holding a letter she would not know where to send and writing anyway. He thought of the two halves of a heart clicking into one. He thought of Ren's ribcage rising and falling in sleep, steady as a tide. "I think she sees what she made me promise," he said. "To love in detail." Ellie nodded like that was an acceptable theology. She yawned. We did good, she said, proud and a little surprised. We did good, he agreed, keeping his voice even so it would not spill. The story did not end in that living room because stories never end where we want them to. There were fights about clothes and hair and whether Ren had to invite the girl who had been cruel to her party. There were days the letter felt like weight and not wing. There were days therapy unearthed things none of them wanted to look at. There were mornings when Ren woke from dreams of the woman with glasses and smelled coffee not brewed anymore and cried quietly, and then loudly, and then not at all. There were moments when Judith apologized to Ren for something as small as cutting an apple wrong, and Ren looked at her with terror and allowed it. There were days Caleb looked at Naomi's picture and said out loud, "Why didn't you tell me?" And days he sat on the edge of the tub while Ren drew birds on the fogged mirror and said, "You did," and allowed himself to be angry at who she had been and grateful for who she was and aware that being both is what love is. The adoption came through the following July in a small room with bad painting and good light. Ren wore a dress she hated because Ellie picked it, and a hair clip shaped like a star because Judith had bought it, and she didn't hate that. The judge called her Rowan Ren Reed and the room clapped. Ren flinched at the noise and then smiled, startled by the way her own face felt when it wasn't braced. They celebrated with nachos that fell apart as soon as you tried to lift them, and a cake with terrible handwriting. Marla hugged Ren and told her she would always answer her calls even if it was 10 years from now and she was a lawyer in a suit. Ren asked if she could be a vet and a pilot and a person who rides trains for free. Marla said yes. Caleb wrote the check and grimaced. Ellie got frosting on the dog. Hank barked at the sun. After everyone went home and the apartment settled to its new gravity, Ren pulled the letter out from under the bed where she kept it and put it on the bookshelf next to Naomi's picture. "We can look at it," she told the room, which meant herself. "We can look at it and it can look at us." She turned to Caleb. "If we have a bird feeder," she said, not looking at him, "will birds come?" "If you put seed in it," he said, not looking at her. She nodded, serious. "Okay," she said. "Let's try." They put up a bird feeder on the fire escape despite the landlord's passive-aggressive note. Ren sat on the couch with her knees tucked up, watching the window like a screen. When the first wren came, it was a finch, but they all agreed it was a wren because a story should have some mercy. She burst into joy so pure Caleb felt his chest ache. "See," Ellie breathed. "You promised." Ren nodded, wiped at her face, and didn't pretend it was anything else. Another Christmas Eve came round as Christmas Eves do. Snow fell softer. The town, bruised by a hard year and gentled by small miracles, was strung with lights. St. Gabriel's replaced the tinsel with a star made out of folded paper. Thousands of pieces children had cut and taped, the kind of communal craft that is ugly and beautiful at the same time. Caleb finished late at the shop, his hands smelling like grease and oranges because he had stuffed a peel under the seat of his truck to make it smell like something other than old coffee. He bought milk. He thought of the first time he had walked down that alley and of the girl who had glared at him over a broken angel wing. When he came home, the tree was lit. Ellie was tall now, and Ren had lost some baby roundness in the face, but none of the way she wore sorrow. She wore joy too now, the way kids wear hoodies casually, like it was always there. Judith sat on the couch with a mug and an Afghan. Hank had died and they had cried and then adopted a cat that glared at them all with contempt and allowed love anyway. The locket hung as one, the chain repaired by a jeweler with the kind of tenderness you don't expect from someone with calloused fingers. Ren sat on the floor with craft paper and tape, making stars and lining them up on the coffee table like soldiers or dancers. She looked up at Caleb with eyes that were Naomi's and absolutely her own. "I saved you the best tape," she said, magnanimous. "The really good kind." He laughed. He took it. They sat shoulder to shoulder and folded paper into light. They talked about nothing and about the only things that matter. He told her about his first car and how it rattled when he went over bridges. She told him about a classmate who had asked if he was her real dad and how she had said, "He's unreal," in the morning before coffee, and the classmate had blinked, confused. He told her Naomi used to sing in the shower badly. She told him she did too and demonstrated, and Ellie stormed in and told them to stop, and they did not. At midnight, they put on coats and boots and walked to St. Gabriel's with a Ziploc bag full of birdseed. Ren poured a line on the ledge like a path. The air smelled like pine and the future. "Second star," she said, looping her arm through Caleb's. "Right," he said. They stood there and looked up. The sky wasn't clear, snow blurred the edges of the world. They could not see the second star. They looked anyway. "Maybe it's not about finding it," Ren said. "Maybe it's knowing it's there." Caleb squeezed her arm. Maybe it's knowing you can look up and not be alone when you do, he said. She glanced sideways at him. Dad, she said, sounding the word like a bell. He realized she had called him that 100 times now, and he was still, in some quiet place beneath his ribs, the man hearing it for the first time. Yeah, he said. Thank you for seeing me, she said. She tried to say it like you say past the salt and failed, and the failure was beautiful. He wanted to say 1,000 things. He said, I would walk 1,000 Christmas Eves to find you again. She rolled her eyes and grinned, embarrassed and pleased. Gross, she said. Put that in a card. He put it here instead. He stood under a sky where the stars refused to reveal themselves and felt the warmth of a girl leaning into his side and the brush of another's hand on his back as Ellie caught up and swore under her breath about ice. He felt grief, too stubborn and loyal. He had learned it was not something that tried to drown you anymore. It was something that swam beside you, a dark and patient thing that made other lights brighter. They walked home. The star on their tree glowed in the window like a promise. Inside, the second star hung lower, steady. The letter rested on the shelf, not sacred and not ordinary, just true. The house smelled like cinnamon and tape, and the paper whisper of scissors cutting shapes that become something when you say they do. And the man who had seen a little girl searching trash on Christmas Eve, who had believed a locket could lead him back to something he thought he'd lost forever, sat at his table with his daughters and ate pie and remembered to look up. He knew, and this was the part that stayed, that sometimes we don't rescue each other by pulling one another out of the dark. Sometimes we do it by striking a match, holding it with shaking fingers and staying long enough to watch the light find a face. That Christmas Eve, their faces were lit. That was enough. That was everything.